All right. Gaza War Day 444. No end in sight. I'm sure you've noticed that the ceasefire buzz has come and gone. I haven't heard anything about it in the past few days. There was lots of buzz. I told you that it was going nowhere, and it went nowhere. In Gaza, there has been the field reports are of just unbelievable, not humanly possible resistance acts. You probably heard about fighting in Beit Lahia, hand to hand with knives, liberated captives, liberating captives that are being held in a building. There's fighting in Jabalia, in Beit Hanun. There was reports in Beit Hanun of basically Palestinian fighters coming out after extensive bombardment of that exact area by the Israelis. Then the Israelis come on the ground and the Palestinian fighters are there waiting for them. This is something that happened a lot in the Hezbollah war that just had the ceasefire about a month ago. And that's what happened. They were bombing a village in South Lebanon. And then the Israelis would think, okay, now there's no way anybody's there. And then they would go in and the Hezbollah fighters would jump out and take them out, Israelis would end up taking lots of casualties at that in that immediate battle following. So they're able to kind of hunker down and await the ground troops, same as Hezbollah did. You guys have probably seen a story about how Hamas Qassam has been able to replenish their ranks. I mean, that just this is the strategy that they have. A long war. Israel, Abu Obaida, the spokesman for Qassam brigades, he said that the Israelis are hiding their state of exhaustion and demoralization, and I'm sure that's true. And the Israelis only have the genocide and the Holocaust to increase their morale. The siege of the Kamal Adwan hospital continues. The North Gaza genocide continues. The stories of evil, I don't want to say they should be told forever in history. I mean, I don't want to say they will be told forever in history. I don't know what kind of history we have, um, but or we will have in the future. But they should definitely be told stories of evil and stories of cowardice. You'll never have heard of cowardice like this. They're loading up trucks with explosives and driving them like as drones, remotely controlled, and they're driving them into the hospital and blowing them up. It just, it just, yeah, this should be remembered forever as the most despicable acts imaginable, and their imagination is also extensive. There's another message that I wanted to kind of parse by Abu Obaida. He talked about how the Israelis are hiding their casualties and their state of their army, but he also said the fate of some enemy captives depends on the occupation army advancing hundreds of meters in some of the areas under aggression. So basically, I think he's saying, reminding readers that there's this new policy that the captives are not going to be taken militarily, so they could end up getting killed by if the Israelis do kind of advance on positions where captives are being held. And they also, Abu Ubaidah, a couple days before, said that Israel had knowingly killed several of their captives by intel that they had, where they had intelligence on where captives were, and they deliberately, intensely bombarded those places and killed the captives and the people holding them. So Israel is just taking actions to, like, if you had any doubt, I don't know why you might have had any doubt at 15 months, but if you had any doubt that the Israelis were trying to kill their own captives, you shouldn't have any doubt anymore. So that's Gaza, the West Bank. There's invasion of Tulkarm going on, bulldozering. There was an IED. I saw a video of an IED, an improvised explosive device, hitting a bulldozer in Tulkarm. But the big story that I should have reported a couple days back in the last sit rep was Jenin. There's an ongoing battle in Jenin between the Jenin Brigade of the resistance and the Palestinian Authority, the PA, the famous Dayton trained Palestinian Authority that has been working for the Israelis since the 1990s, of course, but there's a new intensity in the face of the genocide where the Palestinian Authority has been provoking, they've been killing fighters, they've been attempting to arrest fighters, assassinating fighters, and now they've gone to basically the flagship of the resistance, and they're fighting some kind of pitched battle in Jenin with the Jenin Brigade. And there are huge mobilizations for the resistance in Jenin, civilian mobilizations, but there also have been battles that are so intense that the Palestinian Authority has lost men. I think there's only one, but I've read at least about one Palestinian Authority soldier collaborator has been killed in battle, and there have been big mobilizations against the PA. There are apparently I saw a report that the Palestinian Authority has detained 237 of their own members for refusing to participate in the assault on Jenin. But the Jenin operation is going on. It continues. And the Israelis are warning the Palestinian Authority that if they don't tidy up the Jenin Brigade, that they're going to go in themselves, which doesn't make that much of a threat because the Israelis have been going into Jenin every other day for the past 15 months and long before. So they've continuously been invading Jenin. It's actually the new thing that they're doing to have the Palestinian Authority fighting such a pitched battle. And there are multiple injured PA. They are attacking people's houses with rocket-propelled grenades. And it's a big battle. It's a big battle in Jenin. So that's the West Bank, and that could have a big impact on the future because it signals a potential change in the relationship between the resistance and the Palestinian Authority. There's been, and it's something I want to talk about on the global scale, but on the local scale, even with Chinese help, remember the goal has been of the resistance to bring the Palestinian Authority in to get them back on the resistance track, to kind of have them understand that working for the Israelis is a literal dead end. Like they're going to kill you at the end, they're going to use you and kill you, but also a dead end politically. It's not going to get anything for Palestinians to work for the Israelis. So that's been the approach. In spite of every provocation, the resistance has actually explicitly said things like, almost to the extent of like, no matter what you do, we're not going to turn our guns on you. We're going to continue to fight the main enemy, and so on. And now they're fighting back, and they've actually killed a PA officer. So things are getting more escalated in terms of that conflict. And I hate to be like this is everything that we see is inevitable, but it does feel kind of inevitable. It feels like, how could this go on forever? How can you just be patient, infinite patience in the face of no change? It's not getting you anywhere, this patience. There's no sign that being patient like this is going to bring anybody over. It's not a trickle. It's not a trickle of PA people that are trickling all over to the other side. It's just a solid brick wall. And so if they're going to fight for the Israelis, then they're going to end up in battles with the resistance the way the Israelis are in battles with the resistance. So I don't know where this will all go, but it could be a new phase of conflict. And it's true that the Israelis, of course, would prefer Palestinians fighting each other in a civil war kind of situation, but um, if the Palestinian Authority is doing raids and murdering resistance fighters and arresting them, you're already in that situation. So it's just that they're not having any consequences for that situation. It's a lot like when people say, you don't want to provoke the Israelis to war. Like if the Israelis are taking your land and killing your people and destroying things, um, destroying homes and destroying hospitals and killing children, that's war. It's just not two ways. It's just a one-way war on the people and the civilians. So the same goes for the PA. You only need one side. This is my definition of war. We've talked about this on this channel before, but you only need one side to decide they want a war, and then you have a war. You just if you have two sides fighting, then the war goes differently than if you have only one side. But the Israelis have definitely gone to war with Syria, and Syria, the regime in Syria, the new regime in Syria, is not fighting them. I'll get back to Syria in a second, but that's just what I wanted to say about what's going on with the Palestinian Authority. It could get worse, and it likely is going to get worse, but the strategic situation has to change. And with that, it is inevitable that things would get to this point unless the Palestinian Authority changed on its own. Okay, Lebanon. I wanted to say a couple things I've seen about Lebanon. The ceasefire violations are ongoing, but Israel actually announced today that they intend to stay past the 60 days. And they're going to stay and they're going to destroy whatever they want. And so they view this as a permanent occupation of South Lebanon. So things are not looking good for the ceasefire. Now, politically and strategically, it's probably worth getting into this a little bit because this is a big part of the genius of the West and the genius of the US, which is kind of pretending like there are more countries and more independent poles than there actually are. Like the US, the guarantors of the ceasefire, the US, France, Israel, they all have the exact same position. They're all pro-Israel. They all understand Israel's occupation of Lebanon as necessary and good. And they all overlook Israel's atrocities, and they overlook the civilian massacres, and they overlook the crimes, and they overlook international law because they're all part of the West, and the West is behind Israel's genocide 100%. So the trick here in Lebanon is a really good trick because Lebanon's central government is basically under the control of the US. The US basically, what they say goes in terms of what Lebanon can get economically, what Lebanon's army, the actual Lebanese army, not Hezbollah, but what they can get in terms of weapons to ensure that their army cannot defend itself from Israel. They are the ones that decide they decide everything in Lebanon. They decide which planes can fly into Beirut airport. They decide all of that stuff, and they have done so. And so as Hezbollah enters the government, and as Hezbollah is kind of incorporated into the government, you end up with a situation where Israel is fighting Hezbollah, which is part of the Lebanese government, and the US has a veto over what the Lebanese government does. So it's this beautiful situation where Israel is attacking a country whose government is also in many ways under the control of Lebanon, I mean, of the United States. And that's the same situation in Syria now, where Israel can take what it wants because the ultimate veto of what happens in Syria is the US now. So it's a optimal situation for the imperialists because they can decide to attack their own assets, their own allies, their own asset countries. And that's why right now people in Yemen, including Abdul Malik Houthi, who I mentioned in the last sit rep, are warning Egypt in particular. And I think Jordan, Egypt and Jordan, these beautiful asset countries that do whatever the Americans want and whatever the Israelis want, short of, you know, dismantling themselves and handing themselves over for parts to the Israelis. Well, these might have to be dismantled and handed over to parts to the Israelis. And one of the Yemen accounts that I follow, I think it's Al Mutawakkil, and Al Mutawakkil was talking about how he is really worried about Egypt and how, being no fan of Sisi, and I don't usually do this nuance. You guys know I hate this nuance of I'm not a fan of Assad, but I'm not a fan of Maduro, but I'm really not a fan of Sisi. But like, uh, the destruction of the Egyptian state, even in the miserable state that it is, and the miserable facilitation of the Gaza genocide that the Egyptian state has been doing, the destruction of the Egyptian state would be worse because that would create the conditions for the Israelis to occupy Sinai. That's what the Israelis want. You guys remember, I've been saying this for 15 months when the Israelis said, we're going to expel the Gaza population into Sinai. I've been telling you that's not all that's not what it sounds like. They're not going to expel them to the Sinai so that they be under Egyptian control. No, if they expel the Gaza population to Sinai, they are going to take the Sinai. They are going to occupy Sinai and they are going to genocide Gaza's people in Sinai. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to do with Sinai. And Egypt has said no, and they've been able to say no because they exist as a state still. And when they, if the Israelis and the Americans think that it's time for Sisi to go, then they will try to create that situation for the occupation of Sinai, and that's I'm sure after Syria, these are the kinds of things that are on their mind. Same with Jordan. They want to expel the Palestinians of the West Bank to Jordan. That means they're going to occupy Jordan. They're not going to leave a Jordanian state full of Palestinians. They're going to occupy it. They're going to destroy whatever arsenals exist. They're going to make sure that those states are unlivable. The idea of Gaza being uninhabitable, the goal of the Americans and the Israelis is everywhere in that region is uninhabitable. The ultimate kind of, what do you call it? The ultimate end of the Anglo-American imperialists is to render everywhere unlivable. And the logical conclusion of what they're doing, that's the word I was looking for, is to render every part of the world completely unsafe, completely impossible to walk the streets, consumed by gang wars, sectarian wars, corporate areas where the resources are just sucked directly to wherever they need to go, private police forces, private mercenaries roving and doing what they like, and a genocide here and a genocide there. That's what they want. They don't want states. They don't want order. They don't want, and they certainly don't want independent development. That is what they will go to war to stop. That is what these perpetual wars are there to stop. Okay, Yemen. So there have been battles in Yemen. We are now in a full standoff war between Yemen and the Americans and Israelis. So Yemen, over the past few days, Yemen hit Tel Aviv with a couple of their ballistic missiles, just right through the missile defense. They did that at the same time as Israel with the Americans was launching an air raid on Yemen. If you look at a map, I don't believe that there are Israeli air raids on Yemen. I don't believe there are Israeli air raids on Iran. I believe there are Israeli air raids on Gaza and Israeli air raids on the West Bank. And even I will go so far as to say there are Israeli air raids on Syria, although even all of those depend on American assets and targeting and intel and satellites and etc. But the idea that Israel can go and fly all that way to Yemen and bomb them, no, it's an American operation. They give Israelis some kind of credit for it, so that Israel can say we were the ones who did it and we have that power, we have that godlike power over Arabs and so on. Their race fantasies, which the Americans are happy to help them play out. But at after that round, the Americans bombed Sana'a a lot, ports and infrastructure, power. They did a lot of bombing in Sana'a and Hodeidah. There was then an extensive battle against the American fleet, the American naval assets. Yemen hit them. An F-18, an American F-18 was shot down. I have not heard of that happening in this war at all until now. The Americans say the pilot survived and that it was friendly fire, but it's what they would say, isn't it? It's what they would say. So I'm pretty skeptical that it was friendly fire. Yemen, I got a bit of ambivalence from the way the Yemenis wrote about it. I don't think they directly said they shot it down, but I think they shot it down. Anyway, it's followed that naval battle, which the U.S. Navy retreated again, with Yemen hitting Tel Aviv again. So this is a full-on standoff war with Yemen. I think this is on Yemen's schedule. I don't think it's like America and Israel that decided that they were going to go after Yemen. I think it was Yemen that's escalating to the fifth, and they say their sixth phase is coming. And the Yemen defense minister, whose name is also Al-Houthi, he said that the Americans can stop this whole thing by stopping the genocide on Gaza. And he asked rhetorically, wouldn't it be cheaper for you to stop the genocide in Gaza than to keep doing what you're doing now? Isn't this more expensive? Now, Israel's said they're going to make Yemen pay, and presumably they're going to make Yemen pay through, I mean, what the West does, including Israel, is aerial attack, destruction of infrastructure, bombing civilians, and trying to subvert and trying to create an alternative government. So there is one sitting in Aden, ready to go. It's always been there. The Saudis, when they were doing their genocidal war on Yemen from 2015 on, they had that government that's never gone away. So there is a government there. They can try to start a Yemen civil war again anytime. And presumably that would be what they do. It's the same plan they would do everywhere. The same plan they're trying to do in Lebanon, the same thing they did in Syria. They try to have local proxies, and they act meanwhile as the Air Force. So that's what Yemen is going to deal with too. Every situation is a little different. If the Gulf states get involved more than they are, they will be targeted by Yemen. That's how the Yemen managed to stop the Saudi war on Yemen. They started hitting the Saudi oil fields, and the Saudis decided that was not to their liking, and they stopped. Basically, effectively, they went for a ceasefire. So Yemen is going to probably try to do that to Tel Aviv. They're going to try to hit them hard enough that they have to stop the war on Gaza. Yet, like I said, things that make it hard for Israel to hit Yemen make it hard for Yemen to hit Israel. It's far. Look on a map, you'll see there's a long way for these things to go, and that's also why there's no land. The Yemenis have said multiple times, if you give us a land bridge, they said it to the Saudis, etc., we will go and fight the Israelis. So uh, somehow the Israelis are going to try to, with the Americans, are going to try to bring the fight to Ansar Allah inside Yemen. That's always their goal. And so this is going to ramp up. And in the meantime, they will be hitting each other with standoff weapons. So this is also escalating. Um, and we'll see where that goes. So this war in Lebanon, the ceasefire is not going to likely to hold. In the West Bank, the civil war between the resistance and the Palestinian Authority is brewing, and in Yemen, the standoff war between Israel and the US Navy on the one side and Ansar Allah on the other is also escalating. Now, the last thing I want to say is Syria. I just want to address one thing that I'm seeing is this thing that you're hearing from the HTS creatures in Syria and the Turks, where they're saying we're going to Jerusalem next. And there's some kind of clash brewing between Turkey and Israel. I just want to say, I don't believe that any of that is real. I do not believe Turkey and Israel will clash. I don't believe even that Turkey is a neo-Ottoman. I know he says that. He says a lot of things, you guys. Erdogan says a lot of stuff. And I don't believe, I mean, what he's done in the war, what Turkey's done in the war on Syria over the past decade and a half is strip Aleppo down, try to extend their influence down into the south. He's said he wants things in Syria, and he's taking these things. But globally speaking, Erdogan and Turkey have not ever been willing to cross the Americans or the West. They've been willing to cross Russia, and Russia's aware of that. And Russia's always been very careful with Turkey. You guys, you have to, again, I have to reiterate, Turkey is very powerful. Turkey is very big. It's a huge economy. It's a huge country. It's a huge population. It's a strategic location. They have extensive industry. They have extensive military industry, and their entry into this war on the side of Israel was a major, major new development in a bad way for the resistance and for the Palestinians. So I don't think that there's going to be a clash. I don't think they're going to go on to Jerusalem. I don't think any of that stuff is going to happen. I believe this has all been very well coordinated in the Israeli interest, which is the American interest, which is the imperialist plan. And I don't believe that the HTS has any independent existence at all. I don't think there's any reason to think they will ever clash with Israel. They are a creature of the U.S. prison complex, the global Middle Eastern prison system. Their grad school for assets that they deploy under this flag of ISIS or this flag of Al Qaeda or this flag of Islamic fundamentalism, none of which I think they even really believe in. It's basically a mercenary operation with no independent existence. So agency, yeah, there's agency here, and it's the Central Intelligence Agency, as the joke goes. That's the only agency that's at work in HTS, and they are in some sense under the control of Turkey, and they're in some sense under the control of the U.S. because it's all a single project, a disciplined project that is not going to clash with Israel. And again, you have a situation where they're pretending like there are more positions and more um, countries than there actually are. This is a very disciplined imperial project. It's controlled chaos. It's not real chaos. The chaos is going to be experienced by the people of Syria. It is being imposed on the people of Syria. It is to make these areas apocalyptic and dystopian for the people, while the imperial beneficiaries take whatever, everything they want. So let me say one last thing, because it's like I was saying about Lebanon, about Syria, it's a way about the Palestinian Authority. There is a kind of a strategic battle going on over the future of the world. And the I think a lot of the people that I tend to agree with about Syria in particular have been really frustrated about the way Iran has handled it, the way Russia handled it. Um, Laith Marouf, Free Palestine TV, wrote a tweet where he said, you know, the Russians and Iranians were playing chess, the Chinese are playing Go, the Americans and Israelis were playing chicken, and they drove across the board and they drove over the table and they drove over the players. So they just, you know, they're not playing at all. They're just committing mass murder. So Turkey, um, Israel, America in Syria, they just wrecked Syria. And so then you have Iran and Egypt meeting with Turkey and having a kind of a friendly discussion. And Turkey and Russia are having these friendly discussions and negotiations, diplomacy over the corpse of Syria, basically. Um, how can that be? And I think what's going on is that China and Russia, who are the only real powers in BRICS that have some independence and are genuinely, I think, trying to make a world order of sovereign states and development, that and that's in their benefit. They see that as being in their interest, as opposed to a world of chaos and destruction, which is in the American interest and plan. I think Russia and China are trying to just take this approach of deal making and patience and winning people over and wooing countries over. So they were trying to woo Turkey. They keep Israel too. They've not done anything punitive really to Israel despite the genocide. And they haven't done anything punitive with respect to Turkey despite Turkey's destruction of Syria, which is just getting worse all the time. They didn't do anything punitive to Saudi for committing genocide in Yemen. That's not their way. Their way is to try to woo them over and give them benefits and just kind of keep building a world of win-win deals, etc. And what's happening is, while the Americans are going and breaking everything and destroying everything and committing genocide, the American, or like Western sympathetic, Western thinking, Western oriented, um, global South countries like India, like Turkey, like Brazil, like South Africa, even like in a lot of ways. Um, they are in BRICS. They're in these formations and they are trying to subvert the Russian and Chinese agenda from the inside. And the Russians and Chinese are aware of this and they're trying to woo them anyway. And so there, this kind of diplomacy is, it's just totally, it appears totally dirty. It appears totally unprincipled for people who are watching a genocide unfold. Our minds can't handle this, but it just seems to be the way that things are unfolding. Um, it's like um a game of Go. You know, they're trying to surround the West is trying to surround Russia and China, and Russia and China are trying to surround the West. And it's just this kind of patient game. And I guess, you know, if you look at the trend, it looks like it's against the West. But if you look at the destruction and you know, by certain metrics, you could say that it's not going to the world that Russia and China are envisioning or trying to build, or much less Iran. So it's this game of mutual infiltration and diplomacy and wooing and agents. And I don't know. I don't know. It seems very divorced from the genocide that we're tracking on this channel every few days. And it seems very cold and hard to take. And I guess that's just how the world works. We can't be naive about it anymore. Um, and we have to see the world as it is. And this is how it is. And this war is is looking like it's gonna go on for a really long time. And so all of those adjustments will have to be made. Now, yeah. So I'll probably stop there. We'll see how these events continue to unfold in the coming days and weeks. We're reaching the end of 2024, second calendar year of this war. And I don't know if I'm gonna do anything like a year in review or anything. I'll probably just keep working as if this wasn't these dates are not really the dates by which I measure things. This is day 444. That's the date that I'm watching. So hang in there. We're gonna be here for a while. Um, and I'll see you in the next one.